And we come to it at last, guys, the great battle of our time. But you know what? I will not tell you not to weep, for not all tears are an evil. Hey, what's up, bookworms and hobbits and men and elves and all you fine creatures of the land of Middle-earth? We are back one more time, guys, to talk J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, today published in 1955. This is Volume 3, The Return of the King, the final volume of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, guys. Now, just kind of for continuity with the other of these videos, this did actually intend to be a 6-volume kind of series. Book 5 was going to be called The War of the Rings, and Book 6 would be called The End of the Third Age. Now, the name Return of the King, it kind of feels weird to say that wasn't actually going to be the title just because we're so used to it at this point. Tolkien himself was not a fan of that. That was a publisher decision because he felt like the title was a little bit too spoilery. He gave away a little bit too much, but you know what? That's what we got, and that's what we have come to know and love, is the good old Return of the King. I know I was supposed to get this last review up before Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime premiere, but you know what? Things just kind of got in the way. In fact, making a video for Rings of Power was actually one of the things that kind of got in the way. But as for this book, guys, better late than never, right? So did Tolkien stick the landing with book number 3? Well, spoiler, yes, he did. But we're going to talk about the reasons why. We're going to begin with the usual, what is this book about? Now, while the evil might of the Dark Lord Sauron swarms out to conquer all of Middle-earth, Frodo and Sam struggle deep into Mordor, seat of Sauron's power. To defeat the Dark Lord, the One Ring, ruler of the accursed Rings of Power, must be destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom. But the way is impossibly hard, and Frodo is weakening. Weighed down by the compulsion of the ring, he finally begins to despair. Meanwhile, Aragorn, realizing the forces they've gathered are still too few in number to challenge the might of Mordor, must embark upon the paths of the dead to seek an unholy alliance, hoping to turn the tide. Guys, 1955. This is the end of the journey of the Lord of the Rings. This is Return of the King. Now, guys, with this, with what makes it good or bad, obviously, the best part of this is Journey's End. I really do feel like this is the greatest journey ever told, right, in a story format. And I think with this, it is just nothing but rewarding along the way, because you really do feel like you've been to the fires of Mount Doom and back with these characters. You feel like you're right there with Frodo and Sam, right in the heat of it all. So with me, like I said, I feel like you've gone to hell and back with all these characters, especially Frodo and Sam. But you've really built up a lot of rapport with every single character here. Now, I know some people have a few critiques of Tolkien's character work in this story. To me, I feel like they are just right. I feel like you never, ever get to the point where it's like, okay, let's stick with these characters for a while. I don't feel like he's ever jumping around too much. I never feel like it's, okay, gosh, it's been a long time since I've seen this character, except for that brief stint with Gandalf in book number 2. I never really feel like, okay, well, when are we going to get back to this character? I feel like he actually does do the pacing perfectly in this final volume here. But I mean, with this one, guys, it's just Frodo and Sam are literally climbing the side of a mountain here, you know? And so you feel like you are feeling their struggles along with them. And the way of the ring is not just pulling on them, guys. It's pulling on the reader, too. You've got to know how this is going to end. I think he just does it really, really great. But, I mean, all the character arcs in this are just so good. Merry and Pippin are far, far different than the way they started out. I mean, you got to think about Theoden. I think he becomes, you know, pretty much that king that any of us would really follow into battle. I think Theoden, the movie versions kind of became like a quote machine. But you know what? Most of those quotes are in the book, guys, so I'm going to count it here. Eowyn has maybe the most satisfying character moment in this entire book. It's so good. It's so memorable. It's never forced. It is completely earned, and it is amazing. I feel like as a pop culture thing, you've been hiding under a rock if you don't know what reference I'm talking about. The Witch King and the Mouth of Sauron really step up as some really needed villains in the story. Since Saruman kind of takes a step back a little bit in this one. So those two really do come forward. I think of the Witch King is just awesome as like a character that you wish would have been actually in the story a little bit more. And you can find that stuff outside of the Lord of the Rings trilogy if you're looking for it. But also with the Mouth of Sauron, it's just like something straight out of a bad dream, a nightmare, something out of a really, really dark horror movie. Is really, really great stuff. So it's one of those things I don't think that people ever really kind of talk about. They always talk about these as like a family-friendly journey kind of thing. They never really talk about that. Tolkien really does a good job of putting some real nightmarish horror elements into these stories here. And I think the Mouth of Sauron is right there with Shelob, with some of the creepiest things that he wrote in this entire trilogy. And then you got to think about Aragorn. He reaches those heights really that we were kind of promised at the very beginning of this journey. He really does reach those heights, and you do feel very, very proud for him, of him, with him, all those things. So a great character arc, obviously, for Aragorn. Obviously, the name of the book, you kind of get what's going to happen, but in case you haven't yet, I'm not going to say. But I gotta say, Frodo and Gollum's story kind of coming to a conclusion here is definitely the big one, because it's like Gandalf said, Gollum does still have a role to play in the story. And you really do see that it really does come down to these two, really, with some Sam in there as well. But obviously, the biggest character arc of this whole thing is the One Ring, and what is going to happen with this almighty One Ring to rule them all. So it's one of those things where a lot of things now people will look at and say, oh, well, that was kind of predictable. But you got to think about when this book came out, it wasn't at all how this book actually ends. So I'm actually quite happy with how it goes. And I feel like if you think it's predictable or you've seen it all before, it's because everything copied this, guys. You don't understand that this is not the beginning of fantasy, but this is the fantasy story that popularized it for generations and every generation since, right? So a lot of the influence, just about everything. For example, I was reading Brian Lee Durfee's second book, The Blackest Heart, earlier this week, and he talks about these 9 companions, like starting up a quest. This is how all good stories start. So it seems like all authors, modern, everyone that came after Tolkien really has no problems always giving a little hat tip to where it came from. And guys, that's why I think some of these things might feel a little familiar to you if you you're just now reading it. You've been reading a lot of modern fantasy, and you go back to see what is this Lord of the Rings thing all about, and you say, oh well, I just feel like it's kind of tropey, or I've got these things where I feel like I know what's coming. It's because it's been repeated a million times. So I'm going to count that as a good thing. Another kind of creepy thing here is the Paths of the Dead. Now with the Paths of the Dead, I felt like again was the kind of the side quest that when I read it the very first time, I was like, I don't know if I like this. It seems like Aragorn's kind of going off on this side quest right on the eve of battle. Why is he doing this? But it's so satisfying. Again, very spooky, very, very well done. And I wish it actually had been longer, because I like that stuff so much, so good. And again, the Battle of Pelennor Field. I think if you've been waiting for that big, epic, huge, like even bigger than Helm's Deep battle, I think you're going to get it here. This is pretty much the biggest battle that non-Silmarillion, because the Silmarillion stuff really, guys, is a distant memory. I don't remember a lot of it. Pretty much one of the biggest battles that I can recall in all of Middle-earth. But I don't know. Some people might say the Battle of the Five Armies was a little bigger. I don't know. You're starting getting into that. You got to check out some of these lore channels. Like I'm sure Nerd of the Rings has a great video on something like that. But I say in my memory, Battle of the Pelennor Fields is the one that always sticks out to me as being even bigger than the Battle of the Five Armies, and just being this like the epic conclusion to this, these 4 books that I really, really wanted as far as action goes. I was very, very satisfied with that. But I think it's got tremendously written farewells. I think that's something that kind of gets understated. I know that the book and the movies obviously get clowned because there's so many endings. To me, it's like because there's so many endings to tell, and it's one of those things where I don't want to say goodbye to these characters. I feel like these are my friends at this point. I don't want to say goodbye, so I have no problem with that. I feel like it's a great ending. I don't feel like it lingers too long like anyone else would ever say. And I think that the Grey Havens is just a chapter that's just going to be pulling the tears out of you. You're going to be fighting to hold those tears back. So I'm very, very satisfied with the way that this book ends. And guys, I gotta say this is probably my favorite final line of any fantasy novel ever written. So check out that last line if you haven't. It's a great one. How about the bad, guys? Now I'm gonna let you know right up front, when I say the good and the bad, These aren't things I necessarily think are bad. Maybe there's some things that didn't really work for me. And this is a humongous, humongous hot take. Very unpopular opinion alert. Are you ready? I think the Scouring of the Shire is kind of anticlimactic. Are you done? Okay. Let me explain. I think that the whole third act of this novel is just amazing. And it's like, okay, that is just like the big, huge thing I've been waiting for this entire series. And then everything calms down. And then he throws a surprise. Here's a fourth act for you. And it wasn't that it was bad. I just felt like it was out of place. I understood what he was going for here. He wanted to show that the hobbits have learned to take care of themselves. They don't need elves and men and dwarves and, ghost armies and things to help them along the way. They can take care of themselves. I get what they were going for. It just wasn't quite what I wanted. Wasn't quite the resolution to a certain baddie's character arc that I was really looking for. So that's always something that's always kind of bugged me. I always felt like it was like, okay, I'm kind of like settling in to say goodbye now, and you're going to throw this whole extra act at me. It didn't feel like it needed it because I didn't feel like you could get bigger, than Mount Doom. The whole thing we've been working towards this whole time. And you're going to throw the surprise inquest and the end credits to me. It's like, I don't know. I don't really. I don't dislike it. I just think it's anticlimactic. It's the only word I can really find for it. Yeah, and I said that a very, very extremely unsatisfying character arc for Saruman. I think it's, again, not what I felt like. These first couple of books have really been building up to. That really kind of let me down. But outside of that, guys, I don't really have very much to complain about. I think it's pretty much a perfect final book in a trilogy. And I think it's the kind of book that all fantasy stories have looked to try to emulate in the many, many years since. So, guys, that takes us to why should you read it, guys? This is the end of the road. Why would you stop here? Why would you make it through those chapters with 8 billion words by Treebeard and not keep going? I have no idea why you want to keep going when you're this close to the end. That makes no sense. It's like you're on the final lap of winning a NASCAR race and you decide, you know what, I'm just going to stop here at the pit stop. I'm not going to finish. For me, this is the end of the journey. This makes everything that you've done from The Hobbit, from the Fellowship of the Ring, and from the Two Towers worth it. This is the end. This is what you've been waiting for, and it's going to be extremely satisfying. If you've been saying, hey, you know what, Helm's Deep was kind of off page, all the action, you've been waiting for that big epic battle, I think you got what you want here with the Battle of Pelennor Fields. I think it's really, really good stuff. You got some really great stuff with the Witch King here. Everything you kind of want to see in that final act is here. So I think it's going to satisfy you if you want to see the big fights. The satisfying character moments that have been building, you get the resolutions for all of them here. I think all of those character arcs are extremely satisfying. I can't think of one outside of Saruman, like I said, that I wasn't just like over the moon about, happy with. Very, very, very happy with. The appendices, or as I call it, the Silmarillion Light. The appendices are basically an index, glossary, histories kind of thing at the end of this book. And most people never read them because they think it is just a glossary, just like a term saying. It's not. It is very much a histories and some stuff that happens after, some stuff that happens before, some stuff that happened in the Second Age, the First Age. It's got all kinds of stuff. And I think, guys, if you're watching Rings of Power, I think you should definitely read these because, in case you don't know, the appendices at the end of Return of the King, that's what Amazon has the rights to. They don't have the rights to Silmarillion, so that's the stuff that they're allowed to adapt. So there's lots of good Second Age stuff in there. So if you're looking for that, I think this is definitely the place to go. So don't stop reading after that famous final line that I tell you about. Read the appendices because I think, one, it'll help you say goodbye a little easier, and two, it'll give you some context if you are interested in watching Rings of Power. And like I said, guys, I feel like this is maybe the ending to one of the greatest stories ever told. I see no reason at all why you should stop here. So that's really all I can tell you guys. You deserve this. You really, really do. As for my final thoughts, guys, to me, this is the perfect ending to a fantasy trilogy. It has the action, it has the character moments, it has the tragedy, it has the intrigue, it has the doubt, it has the despair, it has the hope, it has everything that you want in a final volume. And the climax is just so great. If you don't count that part I talked about that I didn't really care for. But outside of that, guys, this has pretty much everything that you're going to want in the final volume of a major fantasy story. So the action, like I said, the tearful goodbyes are really, really strong here. And I think a happy ending. It might be bittersweet to some people, but I think the ending is very, very happy, and I'm quite satisfied with it when I close that book. But look, guys, this trilogy changed everything for me. For me, I didn't even know when I finished The Hobbit that The Lord of the Rings was a sequel to it. So when I found it, it was like, oh, wow, okay. And then I was like, oh, Bilbo just got like a cameo? What is this, right? And yeah, over time, I grew to love this way more than I did The Hobbit. I think that has something to do with just getting older. You start to appreciate stuff a little more. But yeah, this just changed everything for me, just like it changed everything for fantasy. It's an amazing tale, and I think this is an incredible final volume to this whole thing. But I think the ending is just so incredibly satisfying, and it's just one of those endings, like I said, I don't feel like it ever lingers, but I might be, just like I said, too close to some of the characters maybe, and I'm seeing past all those things. But I think the goodbyes in this are just some of the best ever, and it will bring you to the verge of tears. And that's why, guys, The Lord of the Rings is my favorite completed fantasy work of all time, and I doubt this late in my life that anything is going to be able to dethrone it. And there are a couple of other series out there that are close, but I think they'd have to be completed before I could say that they knocked off Mr. Tolkien and the incredible things that he achieved here. And guys, that was The Hobbit. That was the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm so excited to finally have been able to talk to you guys about the works of Mr. Tolkien. I don't feel like at this point there's nothing I can tell you that you haven't already heard. If you haven't read it yet, read it. Please read it. It's worth your time. And like I said, try to keep in mind, okay, if you've only read a ton of modern fantasy, think about it, guys. This came out, 70 years ago. And think about where the genre was at the time. It was dead. It was dormant. There wasn't really much going on. And this changed and influenced everything that came after it in our genre. And I think, you know what? You owe it your allegiance to at least try it. So that's my sales pitch, guys. I hope you will pick it up. But Return of the King, the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a whole, guys, what did you think? Drop in the comments and let me know. And let me know also if you'd be interested in me continuing this series. I have never read Beren and Luthien. I have never read The Children of Húrin. I have never read The Fall of Gondolin. I read The Silmarillion as a teenager. Don't remember a ton about it. If you'd like me to talk about these things on the channel, guys, let me know, because I'd love to dive into it and talk about them some more. So that's what I have, guys. So drop in the comments, and I will talk to you there.